Any further? Don't. 10-minute recess.
Second.
Made and seconded for 10-minute recess. All in favor, say aye.
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 So it is. Are we back in session, Mr. Pownell? You got some wrap-up comments on that?
I've had a minute to think about item 2 on the hospital commission concerns. Since they are supposedly having a meeting on Monday, and unfortunately my schedule is not where I'd like to propose that someone address the council as far as the questions that I posed at the table at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Is that a motion?
I make that in form of a motion.
I'll second that.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion on it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, number 3 on new business is list of surety bonds, required of city officials. Mr. Pownell, Ms. Balance.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Made and seconded. Floor is open. Mr. Pownell.
Has the city attorney seen the, I'm not sure if this really answers the question that was being asked as far as ensuring that each of the appropriate city officials, whether or not that says that, does that say that if positions change, that it's not by name, it's by position within the city, commissions, departments, this table, whatever?
That is my understanding, the way it works. It's the way it has worked in the past, and that's what this appears to give as coverage for public officials, members of the commissions, and others that are required by state law. So yes, I believe it covers the position, not the individual name. And so if the person holding the office changes, the new person is covered.
My only question then would be why there are some commissions that are required to get their own bonding, and it's by name and position.
My understanding that some of the commissions are required under state law to do that, but this is a general one covering the ones that are not on that specific list of ones that are required by state law to be individuals.
Sounds like we have it covered.
Any further discussion? Okay. Mr. Conley, anything else? Wrap it up.
It'll be taken off the agenda.
All right. Thank you, sir. Number 4 is discussion of the tree cut moratorium. Ms. Balance and Mr. Raphael.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Made and seconded. Floor is open. Go ahead.
I've brought forth a resolution declaring and authorizing a moratorium on tree removal within the corporate limits of the city of Eureka Springs. Our city began as a health resort in 1879, was incorporated in 1880, and the historic business district was placed on the National Historic Registry in 72. This city relies upon tourism as the driving force in its economy, and is in every sense of the term a tourist town, and depends in a large measure upon the natural environment for its very existence. And the right to preserve trees is an integral part of the scenic beauty of this natural environment. The Harbin Plan, which was accepted by the city in 1978, calls for the preservation of both the historic structures and the natural scenic beauty of the area. The natural scenic beauty of the area is dependent upon preservation of its natural resources, including trees, through assertive measures against the indiscriminate annihilation of our trees. We need to preserve our trees for the environmental, aesthetic, and historic characteristics of the value of these trees to our city. In 2011, the city of Eureka Springs sacrificed 820 mature trees for the construction of a high school. In 2009, we suffered the destruction of innumerable trees through the epic ice storm we had that year. The Forestry Service estimated it would take 50 years to recover from that loss. We also suffered the loss of a substantial number of trees during the Spring Street Grand Avenue landslide of 2011. The Board of Zoning Adjustment has not denied a tree cut in at least 10 years. Now the Planning Commission is supposed to be helping us plan for the future, and if they're never going to say no to a tree cut, that doesn't seem healthy to me. So I've brought forth this resolution, and in this resolution it says that trees can be cut if it is within the authority of the building official to permit those tree cuts.
Point of procedure.
Yes.
We just approved a method, and all due respect, I think if we're going to be reading it, we need to go ahead and follow our new procedure, read it for discussion, and then we can discuss instead of having to read it twice.
I'd be okay with that.
Move to read for discussion.
Second.
I have a real call vote on this one.
I move to defer this. I have not seen a copy of this resolution. I'd like to table this until our next meeting to get a copy of it.
Second.
There's a motion on
Or
the
a
table.
The
motion.
motion to table it supersedes that motion.
It's been published since September the
It
12th.
may be published, but I have not seen a copy of the resolution or the moratorium.
I don't
I
have
see
a copy
you have
of it
a
either.
copy, but I haven't gotten a copy.
Ms. Clerk, did you disseminate this information to the different council members?
Point of order. All
Okay.
comments are supposed to be directed through the chair.
All right,
and
I
back
still
to-
move to table this until our next meeting so I can get a copy of this resolution or moratorium of the resolution.
Okay. It does supersede the motion to discuss, to read and discuss. Is there a second?
Second.
James did second it.
Yes.
Is this roll call?
It would be, yes.
It would be.
That's the difference.
Now, this is the motion to postpone, is that correct? Until next meeting for the read. Okay.
Is there any discussion? discussion?
There is discussion.
Yes.
Well, I've not received a copy of it either, and our procedure has not been to vote on something until we've had time to at least read it, and I've not even seen the resolution yet.
Okay. Let's going back to the motions now.
This is to table, and James seconded.
Go ahead. It's a roll call vote, or a roll call.
We're in
Still
discussion.
discussion?
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, would you please ask our city clerk if she disseminated this information at least several weeks ago?
I believe you just did, didn't you? You just asked her, and she said yes. But I don't have a copy of it. Mr. Berry and Mr. DeVito don't have a copy of it. Doug, do you have a copy of it?
No.
Mr. Raphael, you got one? Do you have one, sir?
Just for what it's worth, there was a copy of an email that went to the city attorney with the proposed moratorium dated September the 8th at 8:15 p.m. requesting a cleanup, so be cleaned up and ready to discuss at the next meeting on 9/15. Review and please forward comments or questions before 9/13. I also got an email that was sent to all parties, which might validate or invalidate whether or not our email system is even working, and if we need to go to some other method of informing people at this table, dated the 12th of September from the chair of the Planning Commission. It was on the agenda for the last meeting that got adjourned before we even got halfway through the meeting, so I don't know if, and I'm not disputing the fact that people haven't gotten it, but I'm even more concerned whether or not our system of dissemination of information is helping anybody.
Point of order. Actually, I'll go ahead with the discussion. The minutes, or the agenda says discussion of a moratorium. I have not seen this moratorium, this resolution. And I'm sorry, I don't know whether I've received a lot of them, of the information from our clerk, but I have not, this doesn't say anything about a resolution. It says discussion of a tree cut moratorium. I thought that's what we were going to do. I'm not at this point ready to discuss a resolution, and I'd like to postpone this. I would hope that the council would go ahead and proceed with that. We can talk about it at the next meeting.
Okay. The motion still stands if discussion's over with.
So this is to table until the next meeting?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
Mr. DeVito?
Yes.
Mr. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Pownall?
Yes.
Dr. Kirkpatrick?
Yes.
Mr. Raphael?
No.
Ms. Balance?
No.
4-2.
Or two. Motion carried. Postpone until next meeting.
Point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
Will it be under the same title?
Rather than resolution, you mean?
You can vote to change it to be addressed on the agenda as a different item.
Based on Mr. Berry's comments, which were quite valid, and swinging my vote is the agenda item says discussion of a tree cut moratorium. It does not address that there's even
Resolution.
even though I knew I had one in hand,
Yes, sir.
that there wasn't anything germane based on the agenda that we would be addressing a resolution.
Okay. All right, it's postponed until next meeting.
Under what title?
That's what you're going to have to vote on.
I would move to rename this discussion of a resolution for a tree cut moratorium.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. That'll be on the resolution on the next agenda item. Okay, number 5 is mid-year budget resolution, and I'm presenting it, apparently. Motion to discuss?
Move to discuss.
Second. Discussion's open. Mr. Powell.
I know we've been accused of slowing down city government, but it's a little tough sitting here in the end of October discussing a mid-year budget review resolution, and we don't have anyone here from finance that can answer any questions that we might have if we read and discuss this.
Any further comments? Mr. Raphael.
I was just wondering why no one from finance is here to.
She has a family emergency. Mr. Pownell.
I don't know the right words. I think it's important enough to do, but I don't think it necessarily needs to wait until the next meeting. I don't know. I don't want to say schedule another meeting for this where she would be available, but we sure need the. I don't feel comfortable at all dealing with this until there's somebody that's prepared at sitting at this table. And if we waited this long, the 3rd of November may not make any difference anyway.
Is that a recommendation for a workshop or a special meeting?
Well, I know it won't go beyond criticism, but I move we delay this to the next meeting.
Second.
Made and seconded to postpone to the next meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No roll call on that.
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Pownell?
Yes.
Ms. Balance?
Yes.
Mr. Raphael?
Yes.
Mr. DeVito?
Yes.
Mr. Berry?
Yes.
Dr. Kirkpatrick?
Yes.
6-0.
Yes,
All right.
6-0.
Next item on the agenda, discussion of extending water and sewer beyond city limits. Mr. DeVito and Mr. Raphael. Motion to discuss.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Mr. DeVito.
This has been an issue that's been discussed over the last few decades, and I just feel that if we're to extend city services beyond the corporate limits of the city, then we should be annexing that property, particularly water, because if we're extending water beyond the city limits, chances are they're not on city sewer, and they're going to be functioning with a septic tank, and that's something we don't want to see. I think we have issues in the city of bringing what we have up to date with sewer, and I just feel that there's no benefit to the city by extending our services beyond the city limits.
Further? Doc?
I have to agree with Mr. DeVito. We're going to take care of what we have right now. We don't need to add any more trouble for us right now. We have a lot of water leaks in town we need to fix. Well, I don't think we need to extend anything.
Mr. Pownell.
Is there any issue that's pushing this? I mean, is there a request anywhere that
I don't know, sir. This first I've heard
because
of it since
because
it was on
I
the agenda.
ever since I was on planning, I agree we need to take care of within the. We've got property within the city limits that hasn't had water ever since they were annexed. If there's not an issue before Public Works or somewhere that's driving this, I'd have to concur that anything beyond the city limits at this time is totally a moot point.
Mr. Raphael.
What caused you to bring this up?
Well, it's an issue that I've been aware of for quite a while, and as we have learned all too frequently, when the request is made, it's too late. And I would like to have a vote of council to ask the city attorney to draw up an ordinance stating just exactly that the city of Eureka Springs will not extend its services beyond water and sewer beyond the city limits.
In the last decade, we've lost millions of dollars to water leaks. I mean, it's just, we won't be able to think of extending water lines for 20 years if we find the political will to take care of what we need to take care of now, and finding the money is going to be the problem.
Ms. Bounds?
Well, if I'm hearing Mr. DeVito correctly, I'm hearing that it's his concern that we act on this now, so that if and when it does come up in the future, we're prepared and we've addressed this issue, so it's not an issue. Do I understand you correctly, sir?
That's correct.
Mr. Raphael?
I'd be willing to support a resolution that said no extended water lines until all of these people that have been paying for sewer get hooked on sewer, and we get our water leak rate down to something like 25%.
I would entertain a motion to address a resolution at the next meeting concerning this matter.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Made and seconded to address a resolution at the next council meeting regarding this matter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 7, update on auditorium committee. Mr. Raphael, Ms. Balance. Motion to discuss.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open.
I think probably it's open to me because actually it's perfect timing. I'm glad Mr. Raphael brought this up. We have the auditorium committee had been meeting once a month for about the last 4 or 5 months. We started out inviting about 16 area citizens who had an interest in being on the auditorium committee. And the citizens were contacted and invited with people who had shown an interest and had contacted either Janet Alexander or myself, or left their names at the CAPC office. We waited until after the May Fine Arts before we really were able to get involved, because a lot of the people involved were involved also with the May Fine Arts in that whole month. So anyway, after our first meeting when we got started, we basically had a meeting where the first meeting was talking about the functionality and the uses and the technical aspects of the auditorium, and a lot of the infrastructure and what it was needing and what had gone on, what had been submitted and paid for and done over the last 10, 15 years. The following meetings actually went and discussed the various issues more to the point of running the auditorium and how to create the auditorium into a functional building that was usable and was able to pay for itself for civic, high school, public, and private showings. We met several different times to discuss various solutions, from everything from trying to make the auditorium self-sufficient and to whether it was best to go with the auditorium as a commission or a committee. The ultimate recommendation from the committee was that it needed to be a commission. One of the problems that we found and discussed was from past history when the auditorium had a commission. One of the problems that, and you might say one of the source of failures, was lack of financial support. There were times when that auditorium sat vacant, but yet it was still costing the city money and utilities and payroll and stuff. And basically, the commission had no money to operate on, and ultimately was disbanded, and then ended up going under the auspices of the CAPC on the basis of it possibly being considered as a convention center, and the people saw the CAPC as a cash cow with sales tax going in and operating it. And we saw a lot of shows going through the auditorium during that period of time. We saw a lot of nice shows. However, the CAPC funding those shows ended up losing money, and that money was basically taxpayers' money. And it came to the conclusion of the CAPC that they weren't going to be able to do that any longer, which ultimately led to the CAPC coming to the council last year and saying, we're giving this back to you. We can't afford it. And the city, at this point in time, I think we're running around $60,000, if I'm not mistaken, in utility bills and other miscellaneous, some costs. The total cost of running that auditorium and keeping it functioning for the shows that we have and different things are between $125,000 and $150,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. We've talked about the commission came up and tried to find the best way. We noted that over the last, as I mentioned, probably 10 years, we've had over $750,000, maybe $1 million worth of money put into that building. Some of it, but it's just gone into various things, from removing seats, sanding floors, refinishing floors, reupholstering seats, to air conditioning, and a lot of other items to bring the auditorium up to what it was. At one point, some of us may remember, most of us probably do, that had anything to do with it. It had a suspended ceiling. Plaster walls were cracked, and condensation on the windows. And so we got it up to a point where it was a showcase, and we had, like I mentioned, a lot of good shows in there. Unfortunately, we cannot seem to be able to afford maintenance of this building and operations of it. So the commission, or the committee rather, felt and noted that it was really and we received a proposal actually from a 501c3 corporation, nonprofit corporation, saying we'll be glad to take that building over. And this was one of our options, which thought was to give it to a 501c3 corporation. Unfortunately, this corporation said, we'll take it over and we'll provide entertainment and management of the facility, and we'll make sure that we'll have 200 shows a night in the facility of one form or the other. However, we want the city and the CAPC to keep on paying the utilities and maintenance and a lot of the other costs. If we make money, we'll give money to the city. That if we did that, we could open that up to. I know people up in Branson who would love to have that same opportunity. That's not the way, as landlords, we should operate a facility. So the ultimate conditions, or the ultimate recommendation that the committee came up with, is that we go ahead and have the city council establish an auditorium commission as per the state law. And we felt that if it is to have any type of success, that the best way to do this would be to have the city initiate a 1/4% sales tax dedicated strictly, and I say strictly, to the maintenance and operation of the facility. With a sunset clause, so at the end of the 5 years, the city could look at it and see how the commission has operated, whether or not the people wanted to continue that 1/4% sales tax or not. we feel that if the city and the public is really interested, we can't depend on volunteers that's what we tried to do before, was to have the volunteers run the auditorium, and it didn't work. They have to have some sort of financing. We're running out of money. We don't have the money as a city council to fund that facility. We've done it somehow barely this year, being able to pay the utilities, and then with the help of the CAPC to help on some of their staffing part. But it was the general consensus of the committee that if the city really wanted this, then the 1/4% sales tax would be the best way to go, and with a sunset clause of 5 years. And leave it up to the city. Put it up to the city to vote. If the city really is serious about it, then they can vote for the 1/4% sales tax. If they're not, then they won't vote for it. And at that point in time, we can pretty much mothball the facility, or try to find another solution. I'm not sure with our budget of how we can do that. A lot of the shows we can, the other option is to, with one of with the commission, they might be able to work out some sort of a lease arrangement with somebody to run it with them paying the maintenance and utilities with X amount of dollars. But the problem that presents is that the city may be missing any opportunities for a lot of our own personal shows, like the blues, the folk festival, high school graduation, some of the civic functions that we've been having in there, if we lease it out to a profit or a private enterprise. There's also the opportunity too, there was and still is in existence, a 501c3 corporation set up for the auditorium. I think James may have been involved with it, Friends of the Odd. That is still in existence. And one of my thoughts, and one of the thoughts that had come up was, again, leasing this out to someone for a minimum price, as long as they paid the overhead. However, we still have probably another $200,000 to $300,000 worth of maintenance that's deferred maintenance that's going to be needed to be addressed at some point. If with the sales tax, any surplus that could go into, and it could be dedicated to any excess revenue, a capital improvement fund such as elevators, fire alarms, any emergency lighting and maintenance that comes up. So that's at this point the committee feels that it's basically up to the council and to the mayor if they want to go ahead and establish an auditorium commission. That's their recommendation, and the auditorium commission could try to operate at this point on its own and try to come up with somebody who's willing to run the facility. But the best solution, again, their feeling was to have the council put it to the people to vote for a 1/4% sales tax. So I'll be open for questions.
Does the committee plan to have like a public hearing or anything where people get public input on this?
For
your idea, you have a number of ideas that might work.
Basically, only two ideas was
1/4% sales tax.
well, yeah, and setting up a commission. Once a commission's set up, then they can hold their own public hearing. It needs to be the committee didn't feel comfortable with accepting any proposals or anything. That needed to be a commission responsibility.
But you probably write it to a private person and keep those dates in it, and graduation, various things that go on around town that we need to keep on doing that.
You might. I mean,
They agreed to it.
Yeah, that's possible.
Any further? Mr. DeVito?
There's a very comprehensive state law regarding auditorium commissions. I mean, it lists everything from bonding to all of the particulars on use of a city property such as that. So we're not having to recreate the wheel there because that legislation is already in place, and it's a very comprehensive package about an auditorium commission and how they're supposed to function under Arkansas state law. So I feel we have to head in that direction, whether or not the quarter cent comes into play. That would be something that the commission would ultimately have to decide to bring to the people, but you're going to have somebody to try to be the voice behind such a tax. And without a commission, you're not going to have any advocate for trying to find a funding stream. So regardless of where the funding's coming from, we've got to have some group in place like a commission to explore all of these. I mean, the preliminary work has been done by a committee, but as Mr. Berry said, we either close it up and forget about it, or we proceed with the effort to keep it as a viable part of the community, and that is an auditorium commission.
Doesn't look like we, at this point here, we have the money at all budgeted for what you're talking about, just to pay the utilities, just to keep it barely open. So something's going to have to be done.
Mr. Vino?
I mean, we have good volunteers in the community, that work on the HDC and planning, and, they don't have any money either. So, yet they provide some direction for us. I mean, we can't do it all ourselves. These commissions are very important to the functioning of the community and the city as a whole. So, I feel that the auditorium is a very important asset to the community. So long term, it has to be a commission. The funding will come later, however the commission feels necessary to achieve that goal.
What's the process for setting up a commission of that sort?
Just to have a motion can be made to set up an auditorium commission and set up an ordinance establishing the commission. And at that point in time, we can, as Mr. DeVito said, that the state law is very specific about that. We've actually had an auditorium commission one other time, and we can basically pull that ordinance out and look at it, which I'm sure is the same basically ordinance that's in the state law. And during that process, we'd be having public hearings. We'd be reading it, establishing and having the public hearings and reading it 3 times and asking. I've already know there's 1 or 2 people who are interested in being on the commission.
It'd be nice to move it along so that we have something in place before next year, before the budget.
Needs to be done as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any further? Is there a...
I would like to make a motion that we go ahead and have a auditorium commission ordinance prepared for us to review.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion on it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. 5 and 1. All right, Mr. Weaver, the task falls to you, sir.
You do that
Okay.
in your spare time.
All right, number 8's been postponed till next meeting. Number 9, discussion of access to city property, Rock House Cave. Ms. Balance and Mr. Raphael. Motion to discuss.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Made and seconded. Floor is open. Yes, ma'am.
I brought this up because I went to visit our Civil War cave, which apparently is also called Rock House Cave, a few weeks ago, and there wasn't any access for the public to reach this cave.